Hi, everyone, and welcome. I hope you're having a good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you are. I'd like to begin by thanking you all for investing your time with us on a Saturday. My name is Lamia Al-Mhanna, a member of the Riyadh Art team at the Royal Commission for Riyadh City. I'm honored and privileged to be moderating this panel on culture and future of cities, which is part of Noor Riyadh Talks program. Noor Riyadh, a Riyadh Art program, is the new citywide festival of light and art that unites Saudi and international artists, nurtures creativity, promotes talent, and delivers awe-inspiring experiences. Riyadh Art's mission is to transform the city into a gallery without walls. The theme of this first 2021 edition of Noor Riyadh is Under One Sky, and it alludes to togetherness, to the universal impulse to gather around light, to look into the flames of a campfire, and to gaze at the stars. Through Noor Talks, we will have the opportunity to hear from the hands of artists, professionals, ideas, insights, research, and knowledge, and much more on themes related to light. Without further ado, allow me to introduce the remarkable group of experts joining us today to discuss how public art and culture can shape the future of cities. We have with us Antonia Carver, the Director of Art Jameel, Miguel Blanco-Carrasco, Noor Riyadh's Executive Director, Fatmah al Rashid, Head of EPRA Advisory Group, Ilaria Bonacossa, Arts and Culture Liaison at RCRC, Nicholas Cullinan, the Director of the National Portrait Gallery in London. To start, I'm going to go by one and just ask a few questions to each of the panelists before we move to a wider group discussion. I'd like to begin with Antonia Carver, who has been the Director of Art Jameel since 2016. Antonia oversees the organization's work across learning and the arts, plus its new institutions, Jameel Arts Center in Dubai and Hey Jameel in Jeddah. Antonia, could you please speak to us about how the pandemic has impacted the arts and cultural sector in the past year? And what is the role of art institutions such as Art Jameel in the recovery of not only these sectors, but also the city as a whole?
Thank you so much, Lamia, and thank you to everybody at Noor Riyadh for inviting us today. And congratulations to everybody, all the artists and all those involved in this incredible landmark exhibition and art happening for Saudi. It's really exciting moment to be here. Yes, well, of course, I mean, the last year has been globally speaking, absolutely devastating for our colleagues all over the world are really kind of suffering. Those museums that are still closed, those that are having to see employees go. This has been a really, really tough time. And then, and particularly in our thoughts are those who are working freelance in a very precarious situation anyway in the arts. And then, with the pandemic on top, this has obviously been an extremely kind of challenging time. We're maybe slightly cushioned in the Gulf. We're on a kind of upward trajectory as it was, but it's even so taken all our kind of ingenuity as an arts community to get through this and to reinvent ourselves to make sure that we're able to survive this moment and going forward. I guess I've been thinking about a number of what seems at the moment like fundamental shifts. One, obviously the realization from our wider community, at least we hope, that the arts are more fundamental than ever. There's been a very prevalent kind of sentiment of imagine being under lockdown with no films, no music, no art, no creativity around you, what kind of world that would be. So we're hoping that this leads to a kind of sustained understanding that the arts need all our support at all times. And also, that we need the arts as a refuge. We saw in Jameel Art Center in Dubai, for example, that as soon as the lockdown was lifted last June, we had a real flood of visitors coming back into the center, local visitors this is, without tourists, and more local participation in our programs than ever before. And this kind of need for the arts to give us a space where we can learn, when we can, figure out who we are and how we live together seems even more kind of fundamental at this point, and something that's maybe more acute for the fast-growing cities of the Gulf than other places around the world, where we're still forming our societies and forming our communities and thinking about with a very keen awareness of what the future has to hold for us. The second shift, I guess, is an understanding of how fast we've been working. We've been working at such a velocity, and particularly in Saudi, if we think of the speed at which we've been going and the speed at which the arts have been developing. And I guess there's a kind of desire to put on the kind of monumental arts events that we're seeing and lay down the mega infrastructure that's needed in places like Saudi, but also a kind of increasing awareness that we also alongside that need to lay down a very solid infrastructure. And I guess I don't mean bricks and mortar, but more an understanding of kind of our histories of exchange, our local arts histories, to put in resources into materials and books and developing curatorial and artistic talent and lifelong learning opportunities for everyone. And to take a moment to kind of embrace slow thinking, really to think, how do we analyze what we're doing? How do we document it? How do we slow down to a place of reflection as well as a place of building? And then I guess the third and very obvious example is the digital. I mean, here we are speaking today, many of us in different cities, our tech people are in Italy, and this is that we're talking about a program in Saudi. So this is kind of very indicative of the place we've moved to in terms of the digital. And again, at a kind of super speed. I think now is a moment of kind of reckoning as we come out of the pandemic, at least here in the Gulf, of kind of thinking what works and what doesn't work in this digital space. And considering that around the Middle East, some communities are gaining access to physical art for the first time. What do we want their experience to be online? How do we make sure that physical arts are seen physically? Arts that are intended for the physical space are seen and experienced physically, while we use the digital to the max to reach as many people as possible and really break down those kind of barriers that exist at the moment. Just to give two examples, High Learning is our community education program in Saudi. This year we embarked on a year-long course for upcoming curators, 3 brilliant curators from Kuwait and from Saudi. And we had to shift what was a practical program, in person, fully online. But as a kind of compensation, we were able to reach out to tutors that it's all over the world to come in and really engage with what's happening in Saudi in a very meaningful and kind of in-depth kind of way. Another example, we were due to do a painting commission. We shifted that into a digital commission. And again, we're able to embrace kind of artists from across the region and across the world, and also display that work in a digital context as it was intended, again, kind of globally. So I think these are kind of the ways, in things we've been thinking about this year, and really trying to sort of carve out a space amid all the efforts just to survive, but also to carve out a space where we can really think of where we're at right now.
Great, it's wonderful. Thank you so much, Antonia. And I mean, speaking of what has happened in the past year, I'd like to turn to Miguel. Miguel, first, I'd like to congratulate you on the opening of Noor Riyadh. What an achievement. Miguel is the executive director of Noor Riyadh and has over 10 years of experience working in the arts and culture in the Middle East. He's an avid proponent of cultural diplomacy and as means of societal progression. Miguel, from your observation in the past few days, but also in the making of this festival, how did you perceive the reaction of the arts world and the audience that has experienced after a pandemic? What are your thoughts and feelings for the future?
Thank you very much, Lamia, and it's an honor to be today amongst this fantastic group of speakers, and thank you for the congratulations, which I cannot take personally. There's been hundreds of us, a fantastic team of professionals behind Noor Riyadh Festival 2021, and we've been working very hard, and I think we are very pleased to see that the audience's feedback is very positive so far. So thank you very much for that. I think the pandemic is taking a terrible toll on all of us, but definitely on arts and culture. It's the first time in 100 years that we experience this level of social isolation. It's something that hasn't happened for many generations. So as humans, and that's the theme of the festival, Under One Sky, we were aiming to celebrate what makes us humans together. So for us to experience this isolation, when we are social animals, we are inherently very social, and we need the contact with other humans to progress and to live. So it's something that is definitely taking a toll on emotionally and in many other ways. So having the festival come alive in March 2021 after this very, very difficult 2020. We feel that that's really important for us. Like we are all the same no matter where we are in the world. We're all human, and having a light festival is important because light speaks to us all. Light is a very universal thing. We all need lights to see things physically. Light is the source of life, the light of the sun. So bringing light to Riyadh and having the whole city as a canvas for light, art, and art is a fantastic vision. Riyadh is a very particular city. Expands very, very broadly from north to south and east to west, larger than many cities with the same level of population. So when we were designing Noor Riyadh, it was very important for us to have that idiosyncrasy of the city present. So we couldn't learn that much from some other models that have been successful in other places. So we have 13 locations across the whole city, so we can connect with the communities across the whole different social fabric. And that was very, very important for us to be able to go to the communities and to talk to the people and to listen to them also and to make them feel part of the festival. The cities can be a major unit of change. And we feel that Noor Riyadh, as part of Riyadh Art, is part of this very exciting transformation that is happening in Saudi Arabia today. And through Riyadh Art, with Noor Riyadh as the annual Festival of Light, but Riyadh Art will bring more than 1,000 public artworks to the city over the next 10 years. It's a fantastic vision, and the impact that that's going to have on the people in the communities, in the creative industries, in the businesses is going to be incredible. And I'm sure Ilaria will talk a bit more about that later, more in detail. But personally, I feel really, really excited about the future of arts and culture in Riyadh. And despite the difficulty over the past year, I think the future looks very bright in the industry.
Great. And could you speak to the kind of the main challenges you faced in Noor Riyadh's first edition? I mean, we all know it's the first edition and there's many more to come. So what were the main challenges that you've been facing, and how do you picture the future of Noor Riyadh?
Well, I guess for not just for the team behind Noor Riyadh, but for all of us, we probably have a certain level of Zoom fatigue. You know, it's really hard to get these very physical projects, building things, installing things, do a lot of those things online and via video conferences. But I guess the main challenge is also to make sure that all our visitors are safe, because this is really, really important. We are receiving high number of visitors, and we are making sure that all the measures are in place, so the highest safety levels are applied across our indoor and outdoor locations. That's definitely one of the challenges in this situation, but we trust that we have a great team on the ground that are making sure that that happens.
Great. Thank you so much, Miguel. If we could turn to Fatmah al Rashid now, who's an expert in the cultural landscape of Saudi Arabia. Fatmah is a founding member of King Abdulaziz Center for World Culture, which is ITRA, and was formerly an interior architect at Saudi Aramco. Fatmah played a major role in the development of significant community projects throughout the country, including the design and construction development of ITRA. Fatmah, as we know, the arts and cultural sector started to emerge in Saudi Arabia just before the pandemic. Could you tell us about the past year in ITRA and the challenges you faced, the lessons you learned, and how could they help evolve the sector moving forward in the country?
Thank you very much, Lamia, for this sweet introduction. It is a great pleasure for me today to be joining this distinguished panelist in this memorable moment of celebrating Noor Riyadh. Actually, what I'm feeling now is what we are doing now is we are actually celebrating the victory of life as well through Noor Riyadh. Lamia, you're right that, to suggest that we are at a very different maybe standpoint from many other countries, as the art and cultural sector in Saudi Arabia is new and very young. Of course, we have always had culture. We had our own traditional dance, our arts, our poetry and the music. However, the facilities and cinemas and theaters and large concerts, whether as events or platforms, are in their infancy here. But we had very, very big plans. The Ministry of Culture was established almost 3 years ago. In 2018. As you know, the 11 cultural commissions also were established to champion the various cultural disciplines almost a year ago. And there are numerous and large cultural projects are under development. So almost the whole sector, if I may say, is still in the design and the planning phase with some pilots and initial programs. The sector has not fully moved into a full operational, large-scale operations. However, the challenge that the whole sector faced during the pandemic proved to be an advantage in this emerging phase of cultural sector in Saudi Arabia. During the pandemic, just like young people, they have less risk to COVID-19. A young sector for culture and art in Saudi Arabia, since it's new, has built its, I would say, its immunity, and will give it a stronger start to increase its immunity and to perform better. So even though the impact seems to be less in terms of losing jobs or in terms of losing or institutions closing, however, we do face the same dilemma that other mature sectors face, which is the need to reset and restart. So in other words, I believe the pandemic have leveled the playing field for both emerging and advanced cultural sectors. ITHRA equally had effect in the performance of ITHRA. As you know, ITHRA is an emerging cultural center that opened to the public, started its operation only 2 years ago. So as we were starting to operate and trying to create this link with our community and developing those cultural experiences, we faced the challenge during the pandemic. Something that we made sure that doesn't happen, which is we do not stop or we do not slow down. We created a momentum and a link with the community that we wanted to keep and we wanted to continue on. So immediately we had to move, and what we did was a wholesale move to presenting our materials online. One of the big questions that we faced in the beginning was what kind of contents should we focus on, since the whole world was talking about pandemic. So should we create content that talk about pandemic and the other issues of pandemic and the mental health and all of that? But we made sure that our narratives and contents still focus on what we are best at, which is culture. So we immediately created or transformed all of our offerings from being consumed on our physical platforms and changed them to online. We created the ITHRA Connect, which is simulating everything that we operate and we run at ITHRA, whether it's our workshops, our exhibits, our engagement with the community. And we made sure that this continues to engage the community and our audience. We try to make relevance to what the community is thinking about and what the society is suffering from at that point of time, which is the COVID and the issues about COVID. And we wanted to create a documentation platform to document this, I would say, significant milestone of humanity. And we launched the COVID journal, and we launched the COVID exhibit. I would say the thing that we shifted to was, rather than talking to a very specific community of art enthusiasts, and we expanded the dialogue to engage the community and have them part of the creating the contents rather than being on the receiving end. That by itself created a big momentum with the audience and expanded the link with them. So we had few interactions that reached up to 10,000 of audience, and interactions also reached to millions of audience and participants. Something else that we have looked at, which is we looked at the strategic planning of the cultural center for the next 10 years. We took this year as a milestone year that helped us to decide and design what would be the cultural experiences and the cultural roadmap look like in the next few years. Definitely, we had to revisit our consumption platform. We had to also revisit our focus on what things matter more to the society, what kind of contents that we need to engage them with, and make sure that if there's a physical interaction, it happens in a very safe way. In a way that it keeps the human-to-human engagement, but also allow for a safe space, if I may say, for people to think beyond the crisis that the whole humanity is going through. We have, I would say that this momentum gave us, created a pattern for this year that we feel that we want to continue on. We have reached to audience maybe that was not in our current plan now to reach to them now, which is the global audience, but receiving the positive response that we had, we plan to build on that and continue that and create more hybrid physical and online offerings that will keep these elements and this engagement. I would say we had maybe accelerated the maturity of the experiences and the offerings in a way that maybe we didn't plan for, but we feel there is a positive side of the pandemic, which created an opportunity for us to move in agility to respond to that.
Great. I mean, I agree. I think one of the positive things of the pandemic is allowing kind of accessibility to everyone, to museums, through virtual tours, or even, research and data online. Everything is much more accessible to everyone now rather than before. So I agree that this is kind of on a positive note of the pandemic. I'd like to now move to Ilaria Bonacossa. Ilaria is the Arts and Cultural Liaison at RCRC. She's also a contemporary art and curator and critic. Ilaria has worked as the director of Artisma International Event of Contemporary in Torino from 2017 to 2021, and has been a member of the steering committee of Fnesta Italy since 2018. Ilaria, could you please speak to us about your experience in Artisma, International Event of Contemporary Art in Torino, and the role it played during the pandemic?
Yes, welcome everyone. And I just wanted to say how stunning and fantastic the festival is, and the quality of the international art, and I have to say, I don't think this year we'll see, at least the first 6 months of this year, we'll see events of this level internationally. So it's really, really quite incredible. And I'm sure it will get a level of attention that, no one in the world has had the capacity and even the talent and the courage to continue with a project and pull it off in the middle of a world where, rules change day by day. And yes, Artissima is a peculiar institution. It's a private institution which is owned by the government, by the city of Torino and the region of Piemonte. We run a contemporary art fair every in the fall, which has also an important program of festivals, of talks, and global events. And this year, obviously, it was impossible because of the pandemic. So Artissima had to kind of change form and become a mixed, unplugged version, bringing the talks and the programs inside the museum context. And this was apparently a great idea, that galleries were involved in a kind of turning from a commercial event into a cultural event. But then the situation went so bad in Italy that even museums have been closed. And basically, since the fall, museums have opened 2 weeks in Italy. So at the end, we managed to open 6 days this project, for which we worked very hard. The reactions were quite incredible. We had 5,000 people, given that we could have slots of 30 people at the time and always have them booked. And, it was really challenging. But I think what happened in Italy, for the first time since probably the Second World War, we couldn't give culture as a granted. We always thought culture was there and we could access it with no doubt. And for the first time, I think for many people, my generation or younger, the idea that you could not even go to a bookstore, you could not go to a museum, to a concert, to the cinema. And we're still basically in this situation. In Italy, schools are closed. Bookshops have been allowed by the government, which has been a small step in allowing culture. But it was really, we are still in the middle of a kind of very complicated moment for culture. But this has shown that something that the city of Torino has been engaging with the region, which is Luci d'Artista, which is a project started in 1998, where for the Christmas season, instead of having, commercial Christmas lights in the city, every year a couple of new artists were commissioned a public artwork to function as Christmas lighting for the city of Torino that was acquired by the city and would be installed from when Artissima was supposed to open, so the November, until after the Christmas holidays. And this has been going on. The artists which have installations are very important. And Daniel Buren is a great link between Luci d'Artissima and Noor Riyadh this year with his project Tappeto Volante. And basically this year, Luci d'Artista was the only occasion of art for the city. And it was quite incredible, this level of feeling proud of contemporary art and being in the streets. And, in the small moments of freedom, which was being out in the streets before curfew and walking, it really offered something to do and feel that the city was yours. And I think this, what Antonia was also saying, the idea that we are all discovering local publics in a very different way, is something very precious, I think, that the pandemic will leave. Because it's true, we all like and think internationally. We are all educated in this global contemporary art platform. But it's true that having a special attention to a local community and realizing how important it is in the level of knowing who you are and developing a conscious form of citizenship, art can really be instrumental in this.
Great. And as the Riyadh Arts Art and Culture Liaison, how do you see this project playing a part and kind of recovering the city, both kind of culturally and economically?
Well, I think Noor Festival is already demonstrating the strength and the power of the program. In it's still a complicated moment, and the festival is happening, and like Miguel was saying, the public is responding. I mean, the project is quite incredible. It's really, I think, a first time in history that the idea of an arts and culture program is at the core of imagining the future of citizenship and of public space. And the idea that the use of contemporary art and contemporary production is not in a kind of, let's say, only closed inside museum, but it's really using the public space as an open air museum, changes completely the parameters, in the sense that even if you're not interested specifically in art, and maybe you wouldn't go to a museum, you will encounter in your daily life art. And this will make you familiar with the art and will make you want to engage. And I think there's something special about this using of public space. And also what is very interesting is the idea of mingling a call to international talent, to very important artists that are writing the history of our century, together with artists active in the Gulf area, artists from the region, with this kind of activating a scene. And I think what's incredible is it will obviously change the city. It will bring a tourism, a public, and passionate people, and also people who just come for the curiosity. But it would also transform the scene, in the sense that this level of a project activates a series of work and new professions in the region, which will be a response to all this activity. I mean, there will be art handlers, art installers, art producers, restorers. And obviously the art per se has been there. Artists have been, and art schools are part of the heritage. But these type of professionals are still not so diffused, and it can really make a big difference in the structuring a new type of creative class active in the region, which will be made of young people, of people with different interests, because what is so strong of the program is the idea that art is not arriving as a spaceship from outer space and landing in the city, but is kind of growing with the city in a progressive way, transforming the landscape and making citizens feel it belongs to them.
Great, thank you. I mean, the goal of Riyadh Art is to really kind of flourish the creative economy of Saudi Arabia, and I think Noor Riyadh is only the beginning, and we're very excited to see what it holds for us in the future. Last but definitely not least, Nicholas Cullinan. Nicholas is the director of the National Portrait Gallery in London since 2015. and is currently overseeing £35.5 million transformation of the gallery with the architect Jamie Forbett. Nicholas has also worked as a curator of modern art in multiple museums, including the Metropolitan Museum in New York and Tate Modern in London. Nicholas, could you kind of tell us when the National Portrait Gallery reopens in 2023, what kind of world do you imagine we will be in?
Well, Lamia, thank you. That's such an interesting question, and it's such a wonderful panel to be part of as we all think about these questions from different perspectives in different parts of the world. As you say, at the National Portrait Gallery, we were in a bit of a different situation to many other organizations because we planned to close anyway to do a major refurbishment top to bottom, through the building. And so we were scheduled to close last June anyway, which was about 3 months after we had to close in the end because of the pandemic last March, exactly a year ago. I can't believe it's been a year that we've been in this new reality all around the world. And we're scheduled to reopen in the summer of 23. So in some ways, you could say that, we're slightly shielded from some of the very difficult realities that my colleagues have been outlining. Although, there's other situations that we found, including, as with all of us, exhibitions that have had to be postponed and rescheduled and not being able to travel and, the whole financial situation becoming much more challenging for all of us in the sector. But essentially, we're just focusing on a building project. And it throws into quite sharp relief something we were already thinking about, which is when we come back in 2023, in the future, how do we want to exist and what kind of world are we existing in? And obviously those are things that we were thinking through as part of this project, completely rethinking both the experience of visiting the gallery, the architecture, the hang of the collection, the interpretation of the collection, the visitor experience, digital, all these things. But what essentially the pandemic has done is to put these into much sharper relief and indeed to fast track us into some of these issues. And so I suppose one of the first questions I want to think about, and what I really want to address is to think about the future, because that's more the world that we're thinking about right now at the gallery, is, what does this year plus of relating to each other and objects, primarily digitally, as we are now, as part of this panel discussion all around the world, talking to each other through, digital technology, how does that change or reconfigure people's appetites or expectations for visiting museums? And first of all, does it? I guess the big question that we're all thinking through is once the pandemic is hopefully behind us and we're able to go back to some idea of normality, whatever that normality looks like, will people embrace being able to go back to museums and other cultural attractions, cinema, live music, all these things? And there could even be a kind of beneficial effect and a bounce as we go back to this normality. And history has shown us before with pandemics or recessions that often when things do return, there can even be a big bounce because of this. Or has this experience of being in lockdown, mediated by digital technology, will that change in some ways people's relationship to objects and museums and indeed each other? And so we're sort of thinking about this quite carefully. And I think one thing that we're very keen to do, as colleagues have said, as part of this panel, is to take the best of some of the lessons we've learned, because even digitally, we've all had to really embrace this. And obviously museums have been thinking about digital for a number of years and making really positive steps in this direction. But all of us had to transition overnight from being, primarily a physical presence with a digital aspect that was very important to being essentially only digital. And I'll give you one example. So at the National Portrait Gallery, our patron is Her Royal Highness the Duchess of Cambridge. And about 2 weeks into lockdown, so almost exactly a year ago, she got in touch with a really good idea about launching a photography competition that would be open to everyone across the UK to document their experience of lockdown. And as colleagues have said, this extraordinary event that we're living through all around the world. And so we launched this last May. We had this incredible response. In the end, we put this out to the public and we didn't know what response we would get. In the end, we had 31,000 people submit photographs. I mean, not professional photographers, some professional photographers, but people just documenting their lives, the way that their existence had been upended through this, documenting teaching children at home, documenting experience, of frontline workers at the NHS and hospitals as they tried to grapple with this. And so we had 31,000 entries submitted. We then selected 100 images to become a digital exhibition, which we launched on our website last September. And that had, I think it currently stands at about 5.4 million page views. It broke all records for us. And then last autumn, we took those images and we did a series of kind of nationwide exhibitions all across the UK on billboards and on bus stops and, in communities. And again, reaching out to communities and parts of the country that would never normally be reached by the National Portrait Gallery in the middle of London. And that, again, had about 5 million people as an audience. So, with this project, we achieved a total audience of, more than 10 million, which is an extraordinary figure that you would never normally be able to achieve in a physical museum in the middle of London. And so there's some really positive things that I think all of us can take with this. But obviously, all of us are dealing with art, objects, culture, and those are things we really value for the future. We don't want to just become solely digital. So we're thinking through some of these issues. And for us, this is really at the center of all of the discussions and planning that we're having on a daily basis. And so, for example, the National Portrait Gallery in the middle of London, by Trafalgar Square, as central as you can get. A few questions. One, beyond even people's appetite for visiting museums, which obviously right now is diminished, will people want to also come to city centres? We're seeing now people working at home, much less commuting. Will this return? Will people return to offices in the city centre? Will they return to tourism? Will international tourism return when we've not been travelling? Or again, does this reset things? And so this is a really big question, I think, for all museums in cities around the world. And then assuming that people do come into the city centre, what will the pattern of expectation or experience be in visiting the museum? So for example, you know, we've all relied on exponentially bigger audiences and crowds and blockbusters, just even financially, to keep going. And is that now tenable? Will people feel safe in crowds? Will people seek that out and want to be part of that or not? Big question, open-ended question. I mean, even think about the experience of visiting the museum and the way that now we're so unused not to just being with each other en masse, but to touch. You know, we're being told now not to touch each other, not to touch surfaces. And so think about the effect that has when you enter a museum. You know, are you comfortable buying a ticket and physically handling things, or do you want everything to be contactless? This is a very big issue, and something we need to think through with, you know, visitor experience and the way that you also channel people through the museum. You know, again, overnight, all museums, when they've had the privilege of being open, have had to rethink visitor journeys. We've had to space things out and give much clearer instructions about how people should navigate physically through the architecture of a museum. And, you know, I think some of these things are probably here to stay with us as we move forward. Another big thing, I think, beyond just the museum and the permanent collection is exhibitions. And again, the corollary of what I was talking about in terms of, you know, exponentially bigger visitor numbers, bigger audiences, is blockbuster exhibitions. So, you know, doing a major exhibition with international loans being shipped all around the world, and then hopefully you open the exhibition and you get a very large audience and income. I mean, is that something now that there's the appetite for? Is it possible? Can we ship objects around the world? Is that even, you know, financially and logistically possible? But also, you know, I think a big concern, just speaking from the kind of London museum point of view, is that so many museums, as other people have touched upon, have had to, you know, reduce staff, reduce their capacity. Does this come back overnight, or are we now entering a period where we have to reset our ambitions and become, you know, a little less a bit more focused on what we do and perhaps less ambitious in terms of, you know, the sky's the limit, international projects, big audiences. You know, these are all major issues for us as we rethink these things for the future. The one thing I would say, just to kind of conclude, is that however many years this takes to go back to normal, and indeed to factor in some of the lessons, both difficult and positive, that we've all learned the last year, I still believe in the kind of primacy of the object and the encounter with a work of art, and people have a desire to do that. And I think that will never, I hope, never be completely superseded by just digital technology. That, I think, sits alongside very well, but I still believe that people want to stand in front of a work, possibly with other people, and have that direct experience. So I hope in time that will return.
Great, thank you so much, Nicholas, and thank you everyone. We'd like to kind of move to a larger kind of group discussion now. Personally, when I think we can all agree that culture can play a huge part to support the recovery of cities. I'm particularly interested in what culture and the creative industry still needs to really realize this potential. Maybe Miguel or Antonia could take on this question, given kind of your experience, you know, the past year working in the Middle East.
It's a good question, Noah. Thank you, and it's really fantastic to hear all the different viewpoints on the in the discussion here. I mean, first, I guess I just wanted to pick up on something that Nicholas was talking about, which is this kind of, I guess, recalibration of a relationship between institutions, and, you know, we can include Noor Riyadh in that, and kind of citywide endeavours like that, and their publics, and just kind of thinking about this idea of rethinking the relationship and what the museum has to offer, or what the arts institution and the arts movement has to offer its community. And I think for us working in the Gulf, this is maybe particularly acute, because there's a huge amount of thinking that's going into kind of future-proofing society, you know, understanding community and building cities that are livable, that encourage people to you know, feel very fundamental things to do with happiness and with kind of engagement with each other. So it's a really kind of, you know, in a way, this year has kind of almost forced that conversation and gifted us that kind of moment. And, you know, one thing I've been really interested in is the use of outdoor space. You know, there was a really interesting comment that Edwin Heathcote, who's an architectural critic for the Financial Times, made about sculpture parks and cities being the cultural forum of the future, and just kind of thinking about how we navigate artworks in public space. And then picking up on what Nicholas was saying, you know, I guess one thing is not only taking art kind of out into that public space, but also bringing public space back inside. So just kind of, maybe we have a lot to learn from the way that people are engaging with the sculptures that they're seeing around Riyadh at the moment, about how we can then engage with publics in spaces that are more traditionally defined as art spaces, such as, you know, museums and institutions. And also this idea of the kind of cross-pollination. So for Art Jameel's side, we're launching Hi Jameel, our big project in Jeddah, towards the end of this year, hopefully. And, you know, the kind of cornerstone of that is bringing together people who work across film, the arts, architecture, graphic design, even the kind of culinary space, and cross-pollinating these different cultural forms and the audiences that appreciate them and that engage with them with each other. And I think that kind of sense of communal space, you were asking, you know, Nicholas was proposing the question of, you know, will we still kind of crave these communal spaces? And is that, you know, even if we're having to be contactless, you know, physically in terms of our how we get into the museum and also how we relate to each other, I still see a sort of huge craving for community and a sense of kind of coming together. And I think the arts have a, you know, unique ability to kind of broker that conversation, maybe particularly in the Gulf states, where kind of places of kind of true communal gathering are somewhat kind of limited because of the stratified nature of society, because of the ways in which we engage with commercial space and non-commercial space. So, and how that's kind of defined, the private and the public can be somewhat kind of blurred. So I think that the arts have a very particular and really crucial role to play in kind of really brokering those conversations between each other. And then just also to pick up on something Ilaria said, which I think is very true. I mean, we opened at Jameel Art Centre in Dubai an exhibition titled Age of You, which is all about how tech is kind of shaping us and what we're doing to shape our world kind of in response, and how us ourselves have become data and data is the kind of new commodity that's ruling us right now. And we figured out that exhibition, which is curated by Shimon Brazar and Hans-Ulrich Obrist and Douglas Copeland, was the first kind of major exhibition on that scale to open in the spring. Not because of something, you know, monumental that we were doing, but basically because everyone else was closed. So it was this kind of real sudden moment of international attention and international communities suddenly becoming interested in the Gulf because of the content and what we have to debate and what we have to offer, rather than any other kind of factor. And now we see this with Noor Riyadh as well. And just to sort of second that, you know, what a hugely exciting moment for the Gulf and for Saudi to shine in terms of really kind of bringing together international artists with local artists and brokering a conversation with the public in a truly kind of public space. So I think we need to think also about the roles of our cities and what they have to offer globally in terms of thinking through these kind of new ideas, as well as how we relate to our own kind of locales.
Great, thank you. I mean, personally, and picking up on like what was mentioned before regarding the Ministry of Culture by Fatmah, the kind of the 11 sectors, new sectors under the Ministry of Culture. I'm really interested in how kind of policies can leverage the economic and social impact of art and culture and their kind of broader recovery package and efforts. Maybe Fatmah, you could kind of elaborate on the strategies and, you know, what you believe are key kind of items that need to be included in these strategies and kind of discussed moving forward from kind of a policy perspective too.
Yes, Labia. I think it's very important to first of all to realize that the conventional wisdom that generated past success may be not applicable in the post-pandemic world. We all need to allow enough freedom to explore and discover the cultural roadmap to lead the post-pandemic era. In my opinion, the sector will be evolved and will change. It will change in a few domains, if I may say. One domain, the first domain would be the consumption platforms that we have all faced and we have all encountered and realized. The consumption platforms as we knew them before, whether be it physical or virtual, are going to change in size, in magnitude, and in impact. The relationship now between, due to the pandemic, I would say, the relationship between human and machine and digital gadgets are becoming more and more and more, to the point where we need to think, if this situation continues for a couple of 2 years, for example, how is that going to impact the human-to-human relationship? How can the cultural institutions play a major role in creating, I would say, a healthy relationship for the sustainability of this interaction? Another thing that we need to look at is the evolvement of the destination of those cultural experiences. Previously, we used to have cultural institutes, and audience would come to those cultural institutes to consume those experiences, and this would be, for example, for interested audience, where I believe now those boundaries of being limited to a certain physical space should be broken, considering that those facilities were designed based on, I would say, different codes that needs to be revisited now, would give a lot of restrictions on the involvement of those facilities. Therefore, opening up the boundaries and allowing, for example, we talked we talked about open spaces. We talked about the city being an open museum. But I would also say not opening up only in terms of the spaces, but also opening up in terms of the time. If the day is 24 hours, do we limit to the experience to certain hours of a day like we used to have it when we have those facilities? Now people have access to those experiences throughout the 24 hours. That means the experiences themselves needs to be reshaped to cater for, I would say, more demography, to cater for more spaces, to cater for more consumption times and hours. So all of this needs to be put in places when we are designing the new experiences, the way forward. The whole city would be the platform for those experiences. Previously, we used to go to museums to engage with art. Now art needs maybe to be in everywhere, not only in museums. It could be in everything that the city does. It needs to be part of the integrated canvas of the city and the urban planning, like it used to be many centuries ago, where art was spread in everywhere, was part of the schools, was part of the houses, was part of official facilities. That would take care of I would say, the social distancing and the limited numbers of audience that we can cater for at one given time. The point is, how can we make those experiences very safe for a collective and mass audience to still enjoy them, regardless of the physical boundaries that we might face. This is more or less what we are looking at, and what we are considering. Another thing is something that we have done during the pandemic, where we, instead of launching some events that usually they are consumed in ITHRA or in the center, we went to the people down in the streets, and we brought those live performances to their homes. So they didn't necessarily have to consume them through the screens on their digital gadgets, but all they had to do was just to pick from their windows, open their windows, go out into their safe space on their own neighborhoods, and be engaged with those performances or with those experiences. So I see the role of the cultural institutes is evolving into that direction, which is going out of its current physical restriction and going still physically, but reaching the audience and the consumers in their own comfort zone.
Great, thank you so much, Fatma. And I'd like to turn back to Miguel, and we also kind of received a few questions from the audience. Miguel, someone's asking, it's Trinad Govender. She's saying Noor Riyadh is a major undertaking. For Miguel, what specific measures are you taking to make the visitors safe during COVID-19?
Thank you, Lamia, and thank you for the question. Before I answer that, I would like to qualify very quickly the answer that Antonia made on the first question, which I completely agree and I agree with all my colleagues. But I think one more point will be professional development and capacity building, I think, because for us to maximize the potential in the creative industries, we need to continue developing the youth and giving opportunities to people who are already in the creative industries or that want to access the creative industries. And I know that Fatma and her team at ITHRA for the past years, they've been doing an outstanding job in providing those opportunities. And Antonia mentioned the professional development for curators that she's doing at the moment at Art Jameel. And so for us also, Noor Riyadh and Riyadh Art is incredibly important to have capacity building at the core of what we do and to bring those opportunities for everyone, but particularly for Saudi youth. Going back to the question, and thank you for the question. I think it's very, very important. So when we were planning the festival and under the current conditions, one of the first things we decided is to not have any printed materials or anything that could be shared with the visitors. So everything is online. We have an app. We have a fantastic website where people can navigate and buy tickets and find all the information related to the program. We're asking guests to keep their mask on. We have temperature screening. We check in Tawakkalna's app. So we have social distancing. There's a minimum, in most cases, a lot more, minimum of 9 square meters per visitor. We're cleaning all the installations right after. So there's plenty of measures in place to guarantee the safety of all our visitors. And we look forward to welcome a lot more. We actually had 38,000 visitors only in the first 2 days of the festival, which is a fantastic number in the current conditions. And we are making sure that everybody is safe. But thanks for the question, and thanks, Lamia.
Thank you. We have received kind of a few questions. So the first one is from Robin Hancox, and he says, can I ask Nicholas, how is this pandemic affecting art in general and the experience of going to museums?
Thank you. Good question. Well, it depends if you can go to museums. I mean, I suppose there's a few things to talk about there. One is, and you know, I can't speak on behalf of artists or all artists, but the artists that I'm in touch with on a regular basis or friendly with, you know, obviously this is affecting their practice, depending on the nature of what they do. For some, they've managed to kind of, as many of us have had to do, kind of go within themselves. For some, it's actually not been that different than the normal experience, spending lots of time alone in the studio. And then it really depends beyond temperament on the type of work people make. You know, for example, coming from a portraiture background, this presents real challenges to people that, you know, paint or draw from life. You know, that's often very difficult or impossible to do right now. And so people having to use digital technology. I know I've sat for more than one Zoom portrait where someone, you know, uses Zoom as a way to kind of make a portrait of you, either photographically or sketching. So people are doing really ingenious things. But I think, you know, as with all of us, artists are finding this a sort of tricky time to navigate, and it's affecting their work in different ways. And it'll be very interesting to see in the future what type of work which we're beginning to see now, but really to understand what type of work was made during the whole course of this pandemic. And then in terms of museums, obviously it's still very challenging. Speaking again from a kind of London perspective, obviously, the National Portrait Gallery were closed anyway for this big refurbishment, which in many ways is, I suppose, a blessing. But all of my colleagues and sister institutions that have been able to open from last summer up until December, and then again, hopefully in May onwards, even when museums are able to open, they're seeing obviously much reduced attendance. That's very challenging in terms of income, but I think also morale, for people that work in museums. And again, hopefully this is temporary. I don't want to be too doomy and gloomy. But yeah, it's a challenging time right now. And I think the big question is what happens in the future, and whether this is a temporary situation that we almost, pandemics are really interesting things because they tend to be forgotten about. If you think about the Spanish flu, which, affected tens of millions of people, well, everyone, but tens of millions of people died around the globe, from 1919, and it lasted about 2 years. And in a way, it's forgotten about. Or, the so-called Hong Kong flu that really hit Germany hard in the late 60s. These things, because pandemics are strangely unspectacular, or they were certainly before social media, we tend to forget about them. So it'll be very interesting to know if we just go back to normal, whatever normal is or was or looks like, or whether this permanently resets things. Who knows? Let's see. I'm optimistic, but it's unknowable right now.
Great, thank you. Ilaria, would you like to kind of elaborate, given your experience on this point?
Yes, I wanted to talk about the idea of a future generation of possible visitors who are born without a digital divide. Everyone here in this panel, or maybe Lamia, you are younger than most, but started using social media in a kind of professional phase of our life, while there is a generation of people for whom reality goes through digital. And I think this is a huge challenge. And the fact that many of these people, kids especially, are not having access in many places of the world to education and contact, will push their perception of reality through digital in a very strong way. And I think art really can have an important role in creatively engaging a future generation in physically experiencing the world, because we all know that the only virtual experience, people are nastier when they talk to other people on social media. You would never have the courage to say the same thing through a phone call or in the face of people. And this brings many problems to younger generation. And I really see that there is a goal and a role of public space through culture in getting people to interact and actually physically take responsibility for who they are as citizens.
Great, thank you. Antonia, I'd like to turn to you, and maybe I'll just throw a couple of other questions that we received as well. We received a question from Saad, and he says, are there any new technology in art that can affect the future of art? And how is nanotechnology kind of going to make a difference in art? I'm not sure if we have any kind of technology expert here, but I'll throw it on the table, and whoever I think believes that they could answer that question maybe could take it on. But Antonia, please kind of go ahead.
Oh no, well, thank you. Yeah, I'm definitely not a tech expert and wouldn't be able to answer on the sort of technical side of that. But I think it's very interesting what Ilaria was saying about this kind of presence of online selves. And obviously this has been identified as a particular subject matter for young artists growing up in the Gulf. There's a real kind of generation now that are really kind of coming at their practice from an idea that they have an online self and an offline self, and that these two are, have an equal presence in their day-to-day lives and in how they kind of broker relationships with others around the world. And I'm thinking of the work of Sarah Abu Abdullah, for example, who is in the exhibition at Noor Riyadh, who's talked about this a lot during her practice. And then just to pick up on something that the question that went to Nicholas about museums at this time, and I don't know whether everybody saw the survey that was done recently. I think it was Hyperallergic that sort of highlighted it, that, it's been identified that going to museums is one of the safest kind of forms of entertainment, if we think of what we do as entertainment, that exists out there at the moment. So I think just us trying to sort of message, and I know this is obviously a really big deal in the UK right now about, museums being the last to open after, shops and galleries and gyms and everything else, that we need to sort of really, us as a kind of cultural body, need to make sure that we're lobbying the powers that be to really see the cultural, our cultural lives as absolutely fundamental to how we exist as human beings. And I think that the place that we have at the moment in Saudi and in the UAE and around the Gulf is that conversation in terms of the government coming together with the arts community and together kind of pushing forward the industry is maybe happening for the first time. So that kind of recognition is something that's really allowing a particular kind of flourishing of what's going on. And just back to what Miguel was saying about kind of capacity building, I couldn't agree more. I think this is the biggest challenge that we have ahead and also the most exciting one. But we can see, through all the different endeavours that have been going on and the way that government is now involved. So something like Noor Riyadh, gives even more validation to young people coming up saying, I want to work in the arts, I want to be an artist, I want to be a curator. Everything that ISRA has done over the years for so long, really then allows people to have that conversation. And we can see that from one generation to the next, that is an absolutely radical shift for this even to be seen as something that's valid to kind of to hope for and wish for. So then if we can add the education on top, all the better. And then back to the conversation about technology and the use of light technology. I don't know if I can comment particularly on light, but I mean, obviously more and more engagement with the idea of tech and digital lives is going to impact whether people express that through more traditional means of, painting and drawing or something that's much more high tech. It's still an engagement with kind of how are we living our lives online and what is that doing to us and our societies at large.
Thank you, Antonia. I mean, I think really with Noor Riyadh, it's the artworks are mostly, it's about light, it's all technology. So maybe Miguel could kind of elaborate on the point regarding technology and kind of the type of technology that will be involved in art moving forward. Please go ahead.
Thanks, Lamia. I think it's a really good question, fantastic question, and completely agree with Antonia as well on the art side. Artists are innovators at heart as well. So, and technology it could be a very important tool for innovation. And we've seen just a few days ago that there was a blockchain art that went on an auction very successfully. And to give some examples of the festival, we are very excited to have some artists that are really using technology as part of their works. We have a great work by Daniel Canogar called Bifurcation. He uses real-time data from electrical storms around the world to do a laser projection on a building in the King Abdullah financial district. And so the lightings that you see projected in that building, they're actually happening somewhere else in the world. And so we love this artwork, and it's never similar because they get the intensity of the lighting, the shape of the lighting, and it's amazing that today just from your computer you can access that data in real time of what kind of storms are happening in the other side of the globe. And it fits really well also with our theme of Under One Sky and how we are all together. We also have Dan Rosgar, which is another fantastic innovator and artist, and he's bringing Glowing Nature, which is a feat of technology by bringing bioluminescent algae and plankton to interact with the visitors. So the visitors will enter a room that will be illuminated by their own interaction with these microorganisms, which are like 7 million years old. So technology and art, I think they do blend very well, and there's some fantastic artists in Noor Riyadh and elsewhere just taking technology and innovation to the next level.
Great, thank you so much, Miguel. I think running out of time, we have 5 minutes left, and I would like to kind of turn back to each one of you to ask you for kind of a closing remark. Maybe we could start with the same order we started with Antonia.
I'm sorry, I was muted. I'm failing at technology even while we're talking about technology. But yeah, no, just to, I mean, the closing, you were asking before about our kind of, hopes for the future in the Gulf. And I think, we're really seeing this kind of such a change taking place right now with these, very large scale events that are really taking culture and art right out to the people on the street. So I guess it's just a kind of need to make sure that in a way we have the kind of solid infrastructure underneath that. It's also offering educational opportunities and the retracing and analysing of histories, local histories in Saudi, telling the history of Saudi art and how there's been this obviously many, many years of engagement from ancient times right through until the current moment.
Miguel?
Thank you, Lamia. I think I really enjoyed the panel, listening to all my colleagues and all the insights. I think it was very, very exciting and full of great ideas. I feel very optimistic about the future, and it's definitely true that we've gone through some very difficult months in general, and particularly for our sector. If I remember correctly, 90% of museums worldwide were closed by the end of March last year. So, and some of them they're slowly reopening. So it's been definitely a very difficult time. But I think that through this capacity building, through the initiatives that the institutions that we represent in this panel are doing, and many others, I think the future of arts and culture in Saudi and in the region, I think has a very, very bright future.
Fatmah?
Thank you very much, Lamia. It was a pleasure really being engaged with this session with the panelists. Maybe one thing I would like maybe to conclude with is the art and cultural sector, considering the pandemic and what's been happening. I think the cities that are going to look at it with significance, with this sector with significance, try to save it, if I may say, of all the risks that it might suffer from during this pandemic, are the cities who are going to be significantly successful in speed recovery after the pandemic. I do not exaggerate if I say it is wise to consider the art and cultural sector as the fourth or fifth emergency service provider for the nation because of its healing power, whether for humans or for the societies. What's happening in Noor Riyadh is a testimonial to that. It's really bringing the hope with its Noor concept, not only to the new spirit of Riyadh, but it's a statement of about hope in the difficult times of the pandemic. I would like to conclude that we all know light is energy. Light is hope, but what's happening in Noor Riyadh is really energizing the hope. And it's lovely to see it. And I would love to see more and more of it across the kingdom and across the whole world.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Ilaria?
Well, I think that my idea and my thought is that this level of the scope of the cultural patronage and investment in contemporary art in the Gulf area should really kind of have a real effect of putting artists from the region in art history in a very strong way. I mean, I come from a country that lives on its past glories and has forgotten that all art was contemporary at one point. And, we are in a country where it's very hard to move at least state and regional authorities to support contemporary art. But the demonstration is that when the powers and the authorities really invest in culture, then art history moves, and it really allows for the flourishing of talent, and even for international talents to go to the region and want to invest. And you really see it starting. And I really believe that the next 10 years we'll see maybe what happened at the early 80s for China, but that the art history will be coming through the Gulf area in a very important way.
Thank you so much. Last but not least, Nicola.
Yeah, just to pick up on those comments, I want to be optimistic, and obviously it's a very challenging time. But if you think back historically to great changes in society, think about the Second World War, for example, and what happened after that. internationally. You know, some of our great cultural institutions or artistic movements were founded in the wake of that. And so I would like to think that we can use this opportunity to rebuild and to rebuild society in a fairer way, but also to really champion art and artists. I mean, the fact that cities such as London or New York, two cities I've worked in and lived in recently, were becoming inaccessible to younger artists. I mean, that may not be the case now. And so I think there's many things that we can hopefully learn and take away from this. But the other thing I would say, which I think speaks to this panel today, is collaboration, and international collaboration is going to be really crucial. You know, we're going to have to really support each other, both as local neighbours, as international colleagues, to get through this and rebuild. So, yeah, but I want to be optimistic. I think we should be ambitious.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. A special thanks to kind of all the panelists who joined us today and shared with us our knowledge, work, and source of inspiration. Thank you for everyone who has followed us online and on our social media. If you haven't done so, please visit Noor Riyadh.sa to find more about our upcoming programs and talks. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, and we hope to see you at the next Noor Talk.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.